But if you just know the actual facts, like people that don't think there's anything, that aliens are real, there's no way, we're alone, we've never been contacted.
Why not?
Gary Nolan, the guy who was on here yesterday that was talking about cancer research, he was also telling us about a piece of wreckage they found from a craft. Was it 1950 that they found it?
Which one?
Direct chain of possession of this evidence from, I believe it was, and John Lear's connection to Bob Lazar and the possibility that Lear was spreading disinformation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I've, by the way, since making that video, I've become more positive on Lazar, just insofar as I think he was at S4 Area 51. And there's going to be a great documentary coming out by my buddy Luigi on this called Project Gravatar. And I think there's going to be a lot of corroborating evidence that he was at least there, and a lot in his story checks. But I think you have to view, and I even say that in this video, that I think a lot of the story could be true. You can't, I think, view the Bob Lazar story. You can't just take it at face value in life.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's a weird one. That was a weird one because everybody was, they weren't, the people that were on the show weren't nearly as fascinated as I was. I was like, do you know how fucking wild that dude is? Yeah, I mean, that guy is deep. He's deep in there.
Deep.
Yeah.
Very deep. Oh my God. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wild. It's a gonzo moment.
Yeah, for sure. Like, very strange. Like, why would you do this? It was, I don't even understand why he did it.
It's proof we live in a simulation.
Yeah, maybe. It was very strange. Like, what would be his objective? Like,
I feel people like that love fucking around. They love getting a rise out of people,
Maybe.
and they love, if he is a sociopath, he loves, going back to the scene of the crime and just as much attention as he can get. I don't know. I can't psychoanalyze G. Gordon Liddy.
He'd famously put cigarettes out on himself, and hold his hand under flames.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
nuts.
just to show that he could control his response to pain.
Psychopath.
Yeah. And he felt like that when you're around him. Like so that thing that they had to do where they got dunked and they're hanging by their ankles and dunked into water, so it disorients you while you're trying to do this task. He did it better than anybody.
Wow. And they just couldn't
At
drive.
like 150 years old or whatever the fuck he was.
Yeah.
I felt like we're gonna kill him. He's like really old to be doing this intense physical thing to him. Yeah, but at the end, he just couldn't see at night. His eye, when you get old, your nighttime vision is real bad.
Poor G. Gordon Liddy.
Yeah, but so how did Lazar know what element 115 was?
I don't know. So element 115, elements are just differentiated by the number of protons. So it is easy to predict there will be an element 115 before element 115 gets discovered. If they have, I think they don't have a stable version of Moscovium, which is element 115. And so if they can find some stable version, I think he'll be super vindicated based on that.
Well, they think he has a stable version.
I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They think that was part of, during Jeremy Corbell's documentary that he was doing on Lazar, he was raided by the FBI. They raided his lab, and he thinks that's what they were looking for.
That is wild.
Yeah.
I think there is so much real about the Lazar story. I think he was at S4. I think he met Edward Teller. I think he was at Los Alamos. I think he was at MIT. I know there's some stuff he told you offline. MIT's engaged in a lot of spooky stuff where you can't talk about what you were doing. There's a lot of federally funded weird stuff going on there.
Yeah, if you want to teach your people how to do something that's kind of fucked up, you would send them to MIT.
100%.
Yeah.
EG&G came from Doc Edgerton, who was, MIT faculty, and that's where he ended up working after meeting Edward Teller, was EG&G. So I believe there's a lot in that story that's super true. I'm just, that lens, you need to apply that lens.
Right.
The limited hangout lens.
Well, it's also like, what is he dealing with really? Like, what is the craft? Is that thing ours? Did we have something in 1988 that was that sophisticated, or is that really back engineered?
That's the
is it a mind fuck?
That's the $1 trillion question. Is this tech protect? This is at a time when stealth craft had just came on the scene. And you had...
When did stealth technology first get implemented?
It was the F-117 was the first stealth craft. That was the early 80s. And you had actually this guy named Pyotr Ufimtsev, who is this...
what a name.
Yeah, a great name. Early 20th century Russian mathematician that Ben Rich and some of his engineers at Lockheed Skunk Works had resuscitated. There's this kind of disagreement between Ben Rich, who is the incoming Skunk Works director. Skunk Works is the most advanced R&D division of Lockheed Martin. And Kelly Johnson, the legendary guy who had started Skunk Works. And so Ben Rich was very pro-stealth. He thought that this was this really important modality. And he and a couple of his engineers resuscitated this obscure Russian mathematician to reduce radar cross-sections on planes. And that's where the F-117 came, and the B-2 was sort of the response to that, and it sort of took off in the 80s. And he was extremely scared about tech protection at the time, and he was hyper vigilant, and he would actively complain about it. And he even called UFOs unfunded opportunities at the time. Pretty crazy, right? So that's the backdrop. And there's also, in 1986, there's a budget line item in the congressional budget for $2 billion for the Aurora. And this is this super stealthy craft that's post F-117. And that's only rumored. Like today, nobody will admit that the Aurora might have been real. And the aerial surveys at the time were picking up sonic booms that weren't being created by the SR-71 or the space shuttle. And so there was something being flown around at that time that was, causing these sonic booms that was unaccounted for.
Whoa.
And Bob Lazar, there's even a clip of him saying, "I saw the Aurora. It was like, it was around at the time, and it sort of just took off or whatever," which is, I think, a point in the direction that Lazar himself is very earnest and probably did experience some very weird stuff, because why are you exposing some probably classified tech? I think there's a lot of reasons to believe that the Aurora was real. There was an oil rig engineer in the North Sea, maybe it might have been the Black Sea, that sketched it out, and Bill Sweetman, this Jane's Defense Weekly aviation journalist, picked that story up.
What did he describe it as?
This kind of... It was a triangle similar to the B-2, but I think more narrow, and it just flew incredibly fast, like faster than the F-117, and I don't know. It was just super advanced.
Can you envision? Would it be actually possible in 1988? The 2017 New York Times article, in my mind, made that was a big shift, because when the New York Times is reporting about it and saying that this is major news and this is real and there's video evidence that they can't ignore, when you talk to high-level people at the government and people like Commander David Fravor, who had that infamous spotting off of the coast of San Diego, when you hear about people like that are very reputable, it starts to change the conversation in a lot of people's eyes.
Right. See, it used to be that one person would see something in the sky and say, "Look, Martha, look, there's something up there." Now things have changed. Now we have multiple sightings by multiple modes. That is the gold standard for looking for these objects. Not just one person, but several people that are reputable. Not just radar, but visual sighting, infrared sensors, telescopic evidence. Now we have multiple sightings by multiple modes. And so the burden of proof has shifted. It used to be the burden of proof was on the people who believed in UFOs. They saw something, prove it. Now the burden of proof has shifted to the Pentagon, to the military. Now they have to prove that these aren't extraterrestrial. And so I think there's been a sea change in the last just several years. 50 years ago, there was a congressional hearing, and it was coming out of Project Blue Book. And there was a lot of laughter and a lot of jokes about little green men in outer space. 50 years ago, that's the way it was. Now, things have changed. Now people are looking at are they a threat militarily? What kinds of sensors do we have? What kind of metrics do we have? We now have, frame by frame, an analysis of these objects. These objects travel between Mach 5 and Mach 20. That's 20 times the speed of sound. These objects can zigzag and we can measure the g-force inside this object. The g-forces are several hundred times the force of gravity. In other words, any living person's bones would be crushed by these objects, so they're probably drones of some sort. These objects can drop 70,000 feet in a few seconds. Think about that. It can drop a tremendous distance in just a few seconds, and they can go underwater. This is something that we didn't realize before, but yes, they can actually go underwater. And they also move without creating an exhaust or breaking the sound barrier. So these are things that we can now document frame by frame looking at these videotapes.
So for yourself, what was the shift? And how did you feel about UFOs, say like 10, 15 years ago?
Well, there is this giggle factor, and it's the third rail, of course, of your scientific reputation, if you believe in these things. But the evidence is accumulating over the last several years. Now, when I was first approached by Carolyn Corey, the producer of this film, A Tear in the Sky, I was skeptical. I said to myself, come on. I mean, 5 days? 5 days you're going to look for flying saucers in the sky? What happens if the aliens are camera shy and they don't show up in 5 days? So I was pleasantly surprised when they actually found something. They actually have photographic evidence of objects that can gyrate just the way the Pentagon has said. And so we now have a sea change. A center of gravity has changed with regards to looking at these objects. We no longer simply look at one individual seeing something in the sky. No, we demand hours of videotape, multiple sightings by multiple modes. That's the gold standard now.
So what do you think is happening? Do you think that this is something that maybe another government from another country has created that far surpasses our abilities, or do you think that this is coming from somewhere else?
Well, the Pentagon has listed, I think, 5 different options. One option, of course, is that they're weather balloons or something that's an artifact of our space program. Maybe a piece of rocket that is plunging back into the Earth's atmosphere. That's one category. Another category is anomalous weather events. They happen, and they have to be looked at very carefully. But the last option is other. That is not just the Russians or the Chinese, because these objects apparently can gyrate faster than what the Chinese and the Russians can muster, but it opened the door to the possibility of other. They didn't specify what other was, but you can fill in the dots yourself. Now, one possibility for other is hypersonic drones. We see that in warfare now. The Russians, in the Battle of Ukraine, is actually using hypersonic drones to hit targets inside Ukraine. To be hypersonic, you have to go faster than Mach 5. Anything faster than 5 times the speed of sound is called hypersonic. And so the Russians are now fielding hypersonic drones in warfare. But you see, this is something just in the last few months. These sightings, they go back decades into the past, with objects executing these gyrations decades ago. And that's why you have to take them seriously.
So the Commander David Fravor event that we talked about off the Nimitz, that was 2004. Do we have an accurate understanding about military capability in terms of like drones and propulsion systems from 2004? Or are there things that are classified that we are not going to have access to? Like, is it possible that, 18 years ago, they had the capability to have a vehicle or a drone move this way, that information has just not been released?
Well, 2 years ago, the United States military admitted that it stopped working on these hypersonic drones. Why? They're unstable. They zigzag. And that's why the Russians have put a premium on this technology to evade our Star Wars program. The Russians wanted a rocket that can maneuver and therefore outwit a stationary Star Wars system designed to shoot down these drones.
Right.
So that's why the Russians have put a priority on this, and they've now fielding in warfare. We actually see them as a military weapon. 2 years ago, the United States military stopped its program. They're too unstable. They were not reliable, And it was not worth the amount of money to put into it because the military was invested in the Star Wars program, not the anti-Star Wars program. But because Vladimir Putin announced the hypersonic drones, then the United States military said, oops, nope, we have to get into the game too. So now the United States is also working on hypersonic drones as well as the Chinese. So the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans are all working on these things. But you can see how primitive they are. We're talking about objects that defy the known laws of aerodynamics with a technology beyond what we have today. And so that's why people are scratching their heads. Whose are these things if they're not the Chinese, the Russians, or the United States?
So one of the main points of contention is the lack of visible propulsion method, right? There's no, essentially, there's no heat signature. There's nothing that we understand to be present that normally exists when something is going at a tremendous rate of speed.
That's right. Not only that, these objects create no sonic booms. When you exceed the sound barrier, you create a gigantic boom that is then shatters windows and can be heard miles around. These objects can effortlessly break the sound barrier and not create a sonic boom. And they don't create any exhaust. We don't see any exhaust trail from these objects. So either they're an optical illusion of some sort, or they have a set of laws of physics beyond what we can muster. Now, if they are an optical illusion, if an object were to move in front of your eyes, traveling at a very slow velocity, but you don't know how far they are away, you may think that object is very far away from you, traveling at enormous velocities. So a weather balloon drifting in front of your eyes can simulate an object traveling at hypersonic velocities if you think that weather balloon is far away from you. So how do you tell the difference? Well, you look at wind patterns. It turns out that many of these sightings, these objects defy the direction of the wind. If they are weather balloons that you confuse with a flying saucer, then they would be moving with the direction of the wind. But these objects do not do that. These objects can go against the direction of the wind. Not only that, but we have multiple sightings. If an object is very, very far away, if an object is close to you, but you think it's far away, then it's traveling at an enormous velocity while it's actually just drifting in front of your eyes. How do you tell the difference? By having multiple sensors, radar, infrared sensors, visual sighting. Then you can tell how far this object is away from you, and then you can say that, no, it's an optical illusion. Well, we do that now. We have multiple sightings of these objects. By radar, we know how the velocity, the distance. Each time it comes out to be real. And so that's why we're scratching our heads. Who has this capability? And the answer is, we don't know.
Is there anything that's theoretical that you're aware of that could be applied, like from some other planet or some other galaxy or whatever, that something that maybe we have theorized that could be responsible for the way these things are able to move?
Well, when I talk to my friends who are physicists like myself about these things, they sort of laugh, giggle, their eyes roll up to the heavens, and they say something very simple, that a rocket using conventional means would take 70,000 years to reach us from the nearest star. Therefore, these objects cannot exist. 70,000 years for a Saturn rocket traveling at 25,000 miles per hour to go from a nearest star to the planet Earth. That's why most scientists disregard these sightings, because they defy the laws of Einstein.
But isn't that kind of silly? Isn't that kind of like saying, you can't, you know how long it would take you to get a horse from Los Angeles to Sydney, Australia? Isn't that kind of like saying that?
Exactly. And that's why I say that assumes that these aliens or whatever are maybe 100 years more advanced than us. But open your mind to the possibility that they are 1,000 years more advanced than us. 1,000 years is nothing compared to the age of the universe.
Right.
The universe is about 13 billion plus years old. That's how the age of the universe. And so the age of a civilization, just a few thousand years ahead of us, that is just a blink of an eye to the universe itself. And once you go to higher energies, the laws of physics begin to break down. The laws of Einstein and the laws of the quantum theory break down at something called the Planck energy. Why is that important? That's what I do for a living. I work on something called string theory, which lives at the Planck energy. The Planck energy is 10 to the 19 billion electron volts. That is a quadrillion times more powerful than our most powerful atom smasher outside Geneva, Switzerland. Any civilization that could harness the Planck energy would be able to become masters of space and time. Space and time, as we know it, become unstable at the Planck energy, which is far beyond anything that we can muster here on the planet Earth. So, we physicists theorize, how advanced do you have to be to access the Planck energy? Well, we rank them. The Kardashev scale says that there could be type 1, type 2, or type 3 civilizations. A type 1 civilization is maybe 100 years more advanced than us, to maybe 1,000 years, sort of like Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon. They control the weather. Volcanoes, earthquakes, anything planetary, they control. That's type 1. Then there's type 2. Type 2 is stellar. They harness the power of an entire star, like Star Trek. Star Trek would be a typical type 2 civilization where they manipulate entire stars. Then there's type 3. Type 3 is galactic. They roam the galactic space lanes. They play with black holes, like the Empire of the Star Wars series would be a typical type 3 civilization. Then the next question is, what type do you have to be to harness the Planck energy? The energy at which space and time become unstable, where wormholes may develop, gateways through space and time, portals through empty space. You have to be type 2 or most likely type 3. Then the next question is, how long will it take before you become type 3? Well, we are maybe 100 years away from being type 1. We're maybe a few thousand years from being type 2, and we're maybe 100,000 years from being type 3. And 100,000 years is nothing on a galactic scale. The age of the universe is, as I said, over 13 billion years old. And so once a civilization reaches the Planck energy, that is a type 3 civilization, space and time become your playground.
Have you ever seen anything?
I saw something once, and it was right after 9/11. And it was weird because I'd seen this fireball kind of go through the sky like a day or two earlier. This was all during the no-fly period of time, right after 9/11. But what I saw that was, I still don't know what the fuck it was, I was driving my girlfriend from Akron she went to school at the time, she was going to Oberlin, this really liberal school out in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, and I was driving out there, and it's on the way towards the FAA headquarters is like in Lorain or Elyria, Ohio. That's where they monitor all the flights for North America or for the United States. And anyway, I was driving out there and I saw this thing hovering over a house, and it was I took note because like no fly zone. It was like
Right.
and it looked like a helicopter or something, like because there was a light coming down, but no other lights, and but it was like only 100 feet above this house in the middle of nowhere, right along the same stretch of road where I'd seen this fireball a couple days earlier. And I was driving a stick shift Ford Escort, and I put it in neutral and rolled down the windows as I got closer, and there was like no sound coming from this thing. And my girlfriend had like one of those Nextel phones, the early cell phone, and she turned it on because like you should call someone, like call the police or something. This is insane. And the minute like the screen turned on, this thing just like took off. It didn't go like thousands of miles an hour, but it went really, really fast. It made no sound. It just was like, whoop. That's the only thing I've ever seen. But I still don't know what the fuck it was.
Wow.
But you see weird shit like in Ohio because there's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base there.
Yeah.
One time I was driving, we were on tour. I was driving us and right like for the tree lines on the side of the road, and right I'm just driving and a Harrier just like pops up, like those planes that can kind of just popped up like right, maybe 100 yards from the road. But yeah, that's what they apparently keep the alien corpses. You know.
Yeah, that's what they supposedly flew the wreckage from Roswell, New Mexico, to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
It's a good place to keep it because I'm from Ohio and I've never actually been into Dayton, Ohio. So just the outside of Dayton.
If they do still have that there, that's really rude. You should let people see that. Yeah. If you guys really did find a fucking crashed UFO, how about a little heads up? It's rude. It's rude that they've had it for so long, and we've just been people go to their grave just guessing.
Don't they say that like the recovered, apparently the recovered materials and stuff, they, in order to not have to turn it over to the public, they keep just giving it to private defense contractors.
Really?
That's who holds the materials. I think that's what.
Well, I would imagine if I was the government and I had a crashed UFO. That's why I bring it to the private defense contractors. They're already good at keeping secrets. They already know how to make your weapons, and they know how to do stuff that you don't know how to do. They're doing it for you. Like, it's not like the fucking government themselves makes the missiles. They hire people to make the missiles.
There's this massive building in Akron called the Air Dock. It was built in the late 20s, so they could build blimps because they used to build all the blimps in Akron.
It's incredible. Looks like Star Wars.
I mean, it's fucking nuts.
Because it's right in the middle of a neighborhood.
It rains.
Whoa.
It has its own atmosphere. It rains inside there.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's the most ominous looking structure. It's so fucking long and big. It's like,
holy shit.
Yeah.
That's so big.
It's like right, it's like you can see it from like the whole south side of the city. But now they have like this crazy perimeter around it. It's Lockheed Martin, I think, controls it. Like, what the fuck are they building in there? But you can't get close to it. You can't get close at all.
What they're building there is probably minor league stuff. The stuff they build out in the middle of nowhere,
that's
in the
what I'm saying.
desert, carved into the mountain. That's the scary shit.
That's what I'm saying.
I think most of what people are seeing is a government aircraft,
for
either
sure.
a drone or something.
That's why they won't even acknowledge the hypersonic missile. Like they just announced that they were like discontinuing research on the hypersonic missile when clearly they must have it must be fully operational.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine they would tell us. Like, they don't have to.
Yeah,
That's one of the most incredible things about the way the government works.
Yeah.
Is that the amount of money that they get. That was the argument for the reason why this hasn't been disclosed. Like, the government doesn't want to come out and say,
Well,
it was the money allocation. Like, you had to have lied to Congress about where the money was going.
Well, someone was saying like it's like the opposite of brinkmanship. Like there's weapons that exist that if other countries knew they existed, would just be such a fucking threat that it would cause a war. Just the idea that someone had something like that no other country had, that you could wield that kind of weapon. So there's like these weapons that get invented that have to remain top secret because it would just upend the whole fucking power structure.
Like, I got home from the Comedy Store at like 2, and then I watched some goofy. I've been on this UFO documentary kick.
Watching UFO documentaries?
Yeah, I told you it was David. I started talking about it.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Did you have something specific that you saw recently?
Yeah,
the documentary?
2 of them. One of them is Area 51, Bob Lazar and Area 51 and Flying Saucers. It's a documentary on this guy who claimed that he worked on these alien ships in Area 51 in the 1980s.
That gave me chills.
As time's gone on, more of the things that he said have proven to actually be true.
Like what?
Including an element that he talked about, element 115, I think it was called.
Like an organism from outer space?
No, an element, like a man-created element, like there's carbon.
Right.
There's an element that they created that he talked about way before it was ever publicized. And he talked about this thing, and then it turned out to be true. He talked about these, there's these hand monitors that you would put your hand on this thing, and these metal lines would detect the distances in the bones of your fingers the exact distances, and everyone is different. It's like a signature thing. And that they could find out if it was you or not you that was trying to go through. So the way they would scan people, the bioscan, would literally measure the bones in their fingers. And people said that was horseshit.
Wild.
He talked about this in the 1980s. People said it was horseshit, but then later on turned out, no, they did have that in Los Alamos. They did have that in Area 51, and that this technology was very, very
Advanced.
not just very advanced, but very not. It was not well known at all. Like very few people did. And this guy who was creator of this documentary, it was very difficult for them to get photos of this hand scanner. But this hand scanner did exist and existed exactly as this guy described it.
In the 80s, I mean, that's super progressive for that time.
There's also
even
people
for now.
that did approve his top secret clearance to get to this place. They know that he actually worked there. There's people that worked in the same Los Alamos lab with him. They tried to say he never worked there, but his name's on the manifest. It's very strange. It's like they've tried to erase parts of this guy's past because he filmed a bunch of their crafts as they were flying around. Like he knew what days. This is the thing. That thing right there, you put your hand on that, and it actually measures the distance of the size and length of your bones.
That looks like something that's inside of an escape room in L.A.
It does. It's hilarious. It's so true. But
Doesn't it?
I went into this documentary skeptical.
As you should.
Yeah, but I'm so done with all those things. But listen to this guy talk for a while. After a while, I was like, what if he's telling the truth? Like, what if he is actually telling the truth? Because if he's actually telling the truth, there is some part of the government that had access, at least in the 1980s, to alien technology.
I mean,
There
it
were
probably
spaceships.
is. There probably is some truth to that. Crazier things have happened. And also, like, just your mentality of believing him is probably the same thing that made Dr. Malachi Lovejoy Robinson III become successful.
A con artist?
Yeah. I mean, either this dude, there's validity of what he's saying in this documentary, which I can't wait to watch, or he's just really great at painting a picture. Some people are so good at convincing you
That's true.
of truths.
True.
There's, people with like borderline personality disorder and every sort of spectrum in between there. They become really good manipulators.
That is true. However, usually they do that in more than one avenue.
Absolutely.
And this guy's not doing that.
Yeah. So if
He's
it's just a documentary, then
Yeah, also hasn't varied his story. Like, I mean, he might have like changed the way he says things in terms of like the words he chooses, but the actual story is exactly the same as he was telling it a long time ago.
Is this a self-produced documentary, or is
No.
there a production company involved?
No, production company
See, that's where
involved.
it's like, okay, there's probably some validity to this.
But this guy's been around for a long time. I remember reading about him and watching videos about him, 20 years ago.
I mean, don't you think you're somebody who you said and I know this about you. You love space. You're obsessed with that. The idea of what we are in the solar system and beyond. Like, how impossible is it to think that there could be a creature that could breach our atmosphere with some advanced technology and be able to just sort of chill, scoot around, scoots, magoots, check us out, and fucking peace out back up to wherever they're from.
I don't think that's how they would do it, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know exactly. They scoots,
Magoots.
Yeah, they just kind of cruise around. They're looking at us.
Well, he had an interesting
Little
analogy.
reconnaissance.
He said if you brought an atomic engine to these people that lived in the Victorian era and said, "Hey, this is a nuclear power plant. Like here, check this out." They would fuck with it. They'd wind up getting sick from radiation. They'd wind up dying. No one would understand what it was or how it worked. They would never figure it out.
Right.
He goes, "Why would we assume that this is only from that one time with this one device? Why wouldn't we assume that there'd be some other technology that maybe we'll create someday in the future?" I'm paraphrasing him very poorly.
Yes, it's okay.
Or someone
You're a
else
scientist.
from another planet would create that we wouldn't understand at all. And he said, and that's what we were dealing with when we were trying to back engineer the propulsion systems that these things use. They use some gravity-based propulsion system. And it was something that would manipulate gravity in front of it. I'm too stupid to know the science of it. I don't know if he's if you were
You're
a scientist.
You're supposed to know these things.
Not yet. I have to get my degree.
Joseph
I need to
Rogan.
get a degree so I can call myself a doctor.
You should.
I just want to get an honorary one like Cosby had.
Why? It's gone now. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it anymore.
Back.
They
The
took that
honorary
shit
ones
back.
they could take back.
Yeah, take them back. He can't keep those.
Yeah.
He can't keep that.
Actually, I think he wrote an essay, and that's how they gave him his doctorate.
I
But that's
mean,
neither here nor there.
gross.
Probably got more than one doctorate.
I'm sure he did, and he didn't deserve them. But I think, there's got to be stuff out there.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
But I like to say there's not. It's like, stop.
You think
Stop
this is just
dwelling
it?
No, I don't think it is. But it is entirely possible. I use that phrase too often.
And it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
You got to get a
get a
mashup of
new
all
one.
of those.
Oh, it's already out there. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's like 150,000 of them.
That needs to be on a shirt.
It's possible that we're the most advanced. That's
It
possible
is a possibility.
too, because something has to be the most advanced.
Absolutely, and something has to be the least. We could also be on that part of the spectrum.
Sure.
Maybe we're the last to evolve.
It's 100% possible. Like if there's an infinite number of life forms out there, like if there's an infinite number of planets and there's an infinite number of Earth-like planets that can have beings like us on it, who's to say that we're not the most advanced? Maybe they're all like people from the 1820s.
Yeah, they're
They
still
haven't caught up to us yet.
chiseling shit. They're still doing,
I don't think they chiseled in the 1820s.
stone and chisels. But I'm talking like old shit. They don't even have pens and papers yet.
Like the orangutan that was fishing with a spear.
Exactly. There's just a
Yeah.
bunch of advanced orangutans that are like, putting hieroglyphics in caves.
It's possible.
It is very possible.
It's totally possible.
But because we're just basing it off of our own experience and
Right.
perception of what we have been exposed to. We have no idea.
The other really interesting scenario is that they're time travelers.
Ooh,
Is
that's
that-
that's exciting to think
what
about.
they are is some being from the far distant future that understands that it could come back and observe us and see like where things went wrong, where things went right, but do so in a way that's as minimally intrusive as possible and occasionally interfere with things.
Now, believe it or not, I'm not into UFOs. I don't follow stories or,
Even after your experiences?
No, I'm fascinated with the technology, and it irks me like every night I go to sleep that, that it was my own doing, essentially, that prevented me from continuing on in the project. I mean, it's that to be on that cutting edge of technology is so alluring to me.
Right.
But, by the same token, I don't really care that there's aliens or where they come from. I mean, the prize is the technology, and that's what I'm fascinated by. But so I don't listen to UFO stories and that sort of thing. But George Knapp is, he's the guy that has the contacts and tries to thread everything together. And what he recently told me is he found, I don't know, it was either documentation or people that he spoke to. It's that the existence of this project, the project that I was on,